Get ready to get ready.
Coming to you live from the MFG studios
In the heart of America's summer golf capital, we help you play better golf. It's time to get your game on.
and take it deep.
This is the Mike Fay Golf Show.
Here's your host, Mike Fay.
Well, welcome everybody to the show. We're pretty excited about having Jason Helman, one of Canada's best golf coaches. How you doing, Jay?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Mike.
And we have our very special guest, Mr. Jason Sutton. How you doing, Jay?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Mike.
Absolutely. Pretty excited
Good to see you, Jay.
Hey, Jay.
And bringing back the mastermind crew here a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
That's
good
right.
stuff. For those of you that don't know, Jay is the Director of Instruction at Carmel Country Club in Charlotte, North Carolina. He was the 2013 Carolina's PGA Section Teacher of the Year and the 2015 Carolina's PGA Section Horton Smith Award winner. And recently, we are all very excited to name you to the Golf Magazine Top 100 Teachers List.
Calm down.
Oh, yeah. We're really excited. No,
appreciate it. Thank you.
It's great
Congrats.
stuff. Congratulations. It's all good. Today, we're going to talk about putting, right? And,
That's right. Talk a little putting.
And one of the discussion questions brought up is, what are some of the things you look for in all good putters?
Wow. Yeah. So teaching putting to me is like a big jigsaw puzzle. You know, there's a lot of moving parts, and the more, I guess, research or information that I get, you know, through Sam Putt Lab or just teaching a ton of putting, the more I figure out that there's a lot of ways to get it done. I think it's the coach's responsibility to put what I call the matching components together for the pieces that work for that particular player. So I guess, you know, as I would say, there's no absolutes in putting, but there are some things that go together and some maybe commonalities that we see in good putters. So, you know, my list would be, I would say, repeatability. Okay. And that's, again, after, you know, measuring thousands and thousands of putting strokes, is what we're doing at a high consistency rate is what we see the best putters. So, you know, even though they may not be aiming it perfectly or doing a lot of things that we would consider to be things we look for in putting, they're doing it at a high consistency rate. So, you know, my sort of hierarchy of putting, I guess, ideas would be, can they aim it decently, not perfect, but decent? Can they square the face consistently? I look for sort of a smoothness, or what I would call a tightness to their stroke as well. I don't like to see a lot of unbalanced, whether it's the backswing being short and the follow through being very, very long, which is what I see in a lot of my amateur students and club players. So I like to see symmetry in the stroke. And then what I see good putters do is they have a good idea of matching their distance choice with, you know, the read, obviously, which goes along with the feel and touch and the speed. So they're able to put those things together into a perfect picture.
So what do you think, Jay? What are some things that you look for in all good putters?
I sort of look more towards the basics. A lot people getting set up properly. Most of the poor putts come from sort of incorrect setup and then lots of adjustment throughout the stroke, which is not very long, and that's where we see a lot of inconsistencies. So I work really hard on setup and you know, form and function, and if they have something that kind of works, we just sort of tweak it, and sort of like Jay said, just make sure they, you know, have some good face control. It's important, and then, you know, making sure you know, their speed is good. So a few of those things that I just seem to focus on. So
that was one thing I've been often asked, especially with Ask the Pro, and you guys see the questions a lot, is what makes good putters consistent? Do you think it's the same way they aim every time, Jay, from your research, or what is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's the thing, when I do putting lessons now, do it completely different than I did 5 years ago. I call it reverse engineering, and I got a lot of great information from spending time with friends like John Graham and Todd Sones and these guys that teach a lot of putting and teach some high level players. Is you've got to test them to where you see their tendencies on different putts, so more real life stuff. So having them hit more right to left putts, left to right putts, downhill, uphill, and just see how they react, because you start to see some tendencies. Whether I see most good players will aim a little more to the right for right to left putts, and then a little more left for left to right putts, because they understand more probably through instinct and observation that they need to start the ball higher than they probably think that they're going to read it. So there's a lot of little pieces that go together in that respects. But I am big on setup. I mean, I've seen enough, just because I teach a ton of putting. There's some things that you can change in the setup in order to develop a more repeatable stroke, or make them more consistent, which, I mean, I don't even like the word consistent, but just add a higher repeatability factor through, eye position, spine tilt, more forward bend, less forward bend, where are the hands in relation to the shoulder joints, how much, elbow flex do they have. And it goes along with, fitting putters properly. Are the putters too long, which they get into sort of these trap positions with the arms stuck to their body or to the side of their body. So a lot of that stuff can really factor in. So I think good putters understand their tendencies, and then good putters have the ability to get into the same setup more of the time. I don't think anybody can get into the setup the same every single time, but the more they can do it, I think the better they're going to putt, on a day-to-day basis. That's why I like to, especially when I get some mini tour players or PGA Tour players, is stress the fact that they need to take putting lessons more often, because they think, you have a great first lesson and they're doing well, and you don't see them for 2 months and they come back and it's usually a setup feature or something small that's gotten off, and it starts bleeding into the rest of the stroke.
Well, Mr. Helman, don't you think, I mean, some players all of a sudden they get hot. Why do they get hot and they start making every putt, and then there's times when they go through a round when they can't make anything? Why does that happen?
Well, I think that would probably just go to confidence more than just, all of a sudden finding a technique that just works. Mm-hmm. So, they have, obviously their speed is going to be in a pretty good place if they're doing that. So if we look to some of those things versus a mechanical type issue that all of a sudden is, a magic pill, and, I think that's sort of far from the truth. I think that, they're looking at something, I think I can make it. It fits their eye. Some people are right to left putters, left to right putters. They just like that look better, and they just are more confident. So if you get 2 weeks and they get a 2 week stretch going, and then they're putting well, and probably even putting the same speed greens. So a lot of people, if you go to a different golf course all the time, the speeds aren't the same. But if they're playing the same type of golf course with the same speeds, they can stay a little bit more consistent, because the greens they get the feel, they get the touch, and nothing changes. They don't go, playing an 8-stimp green to a 12, and it's totally different, when you do that. So people are all over the place when that happens.
That brings up another great question, Mr. Sutton, is how do you deal with going from different speeds like that? I mean, how do these guys, a lot of the guys on the PGA Tour and stuff, the speed is relatively consistent, but how do you do it from going from day to day and the slow green versus the fast green? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think it's all in their preparation, before the round or before the tournament. I'm big on drills, because I think, let's face it, putting's not the most exciting part of the game. So I like to get my players focused on goal-oriented drills, whether it's I call it the Jordan Spieth drill, or the ladder drill, or some feel and touch drills. But I think it's a lot of, again, getting them to be able to roll the ball a certain distance. I love that when John Graham talks about the poker chip drill or the quarter drill, where you're just getting the basics of putting is just getting the ball to roll a certain distance and then matching up the read. If they can spend more time doing those types of things, they'll start to adjust. Their internal compass, as I would say, starts to kick in. And it's not so much that they're making a mechanical change. They're sort of getting used to what stroke length they need for this speed. But I think it's preparation. That's why it's difficult when our average golfers are going to different clubs or different courses to play. If they don't spend enough time putting, which none of them do, they're going to go and hit the driver, and make sure that they're hitting the ball in the air, or hitting the longer clubs. They spend more time on the putting green. I think would probably bridge that gap a little bit better.
So, what is the biggest misconception in putting, Mr. Sutton?
Yeah, I think what I've found, like I said, doing a lot of research and being able to measure thousands of putting strokes from tour players to our average club players. The biggest thing that I've found is misconception of acceleration, and should you accelerate through the putt or should you not? So, perfect scenario that we see at our club is, a guy leaves a putt short. The first thing that his buddy says is, "What? Well, you decelled," right? And then what I've found using the putt lab is the majority of my really good putters are actually reaching peak speed prior to impact and acceleration well prior to impact. So a couple of research projects that we did was trying to figure out the best movement dynamic or acceleration versus speed profile that performed the best. And what we found was it was actually a decreasing acceleration profile where the putter was accelerating at a slower rate and or just at a constant rate tended to produce the best results. So the putters that we work with every day, me, you, and Jay, are the short backstrokes and then really accelerating through the ball with long follow-throughs. Those just don't tend to be very consistent. So yeah. I spent a lot of time with my average players, my club players, just trying to get them to speed up the backstroke or maybe lengthen their backstroke so they can sort of let the club, fall into the golf ball or be a lot smoother through impact. That's why you see good putters have that sort of smoothness look to their stroke. It's not because they're doing something different. It's just they understand that they don't have to accelerate through the ball so much. And a lot of it's the green speeds that you grow up on. I mean, if you're playing on really slow greens or your public courses, you're going to tend to over accelerate a lot, especially if you're hitting a lot of uphill putts. But for the most part, if I can get my players to have more closer to constant acceleration, they tend to have better feel and touch.
So what kind of drills do you use, Mr. Helman, to try and fix this problem in our players?
Well, I think what I see on a regular basis, and maybe Jay would agree, is like he was talking about the short backstroke, long follow through, which is, I call that the 20-80, 20 back and 80 through.
Right.
And that's, real tough to manage on long putts, easier on short putts, but to try and hit a 30 or 40 footer with a 20% backstroke is kind of tough. So I would probably steer them more towards the 60-40, 40-60. I mean, either way, I'm fine if they go through 60 and back 40. But
right,
just to keep them, have a moderate pace or figure out how to move and how to get that speed. So there's gate drills. I'll usually put my foot behind there. I go pinky to pinky. So I say pinky toe to pinky toe. I really don't want the putter to go too much past either pinky toe. Now, if they're standing with feet together, which is what some people do, then we'll change that. We'll give them a different, sort of analogy. But they get that. They seem to get pinky to pinky, and they go, oh, get the face of the putter back to my right pinky if they're right-handed player, and then the back of the blade or whatever their putter is to their left pinky. And then they go, oh, yeah, that seems to work pretty good. And they seem to find some rhythm, find some smoothness to it. And they start to get that they don't have to pop it as much. I had one guy, I put it on Instagram. He had like a giant back. I think it was like 3 feet in length, the whole stroke from back to front. And then now we're in the pinky to pinky, and he it's so smooth, and he hit it same distance. I videoed both of them, and it's a 10-foot putt, and it looks totally different. So it's just a concept. Their concept to get the ball to the hole is we just changed that, really, how you're going to get the ball to the hole.
So kind of like punching it, right? I mean, that's
choppy.
Choppy, right? Not as smooth. Take that away.
I think there's still a break. There has to be a break in the finish, because if you think about what we're describing is a very short backstroke and then a lot of follow through. What I like to do, and especially it's nice when you got the putt lab, because you've got the screen right there in front of you. It gives you a view of exactly how long the stroke was, so they can start to bridge that feel and reel. So I'll get them to take the putter back a little faster, and just describe it that way. Take it back a little faster, and then when you hear the sound of contact, I want you to stop. And it tends to, obviously the putter's going to slow down a bit when you have collision, but once they hit it and stop, it ends up being about the same length back and through, and it blows them away, because they're like, wow, I felt like I didn't even have a follow through. So, well, compared to what you were doing, you don't. So it becomes very, very balanced and symmetrical. And then all of a sudden, assuming we're hitting it relatively in the sweet spot, the distance control improves dramatically. And so then they basically are just controlling their distance more with the length of their backswing feel, rather than trying to control the speed. Like, that's huge for the average golfers.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of this short backswing, long follow through stuff comes with moving your body and moving your head and all this other stuff, or is that a separate thing, you think, Jason?
Yeah, I think that's more of a result or an effect. I mean, you'll see the head move, probably because the shoulders are moving out of plane, or in the wrong direction, or the lower body's moving too much. That could be a setup feature, but I think that's more of a result rather than something that they're trying to do.
So if there is anything that you wouldn't change in a player's putting stroke, is there anything that you wouldn't go over and not change? Like, you look at it and you see where they're aiming and you say, well, that's not at the target. Are there times when you don't change it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's, again, why I do so much due diligence prior to the measuring phase, which is the last thing I do. Is I want to see what their tendencies are. If I got a guy that's aiming left and he kind of blocks it a little bit and has a steering release, but he does it at a high consistency rate, I might not change that. So it's kind of figuring out what pieces are working, and then what, if it's not just because it looks funny, right? So I got some players that come to me and they aim a little bit more left, but they block it right on line. If I jumped right in and fixed their aim, then immediately they're going to start pushing it to the right, and they're going to get worse. So, it depends on how much you want to change. Am I going to change his release, or am I just going to leave that alone? Because, I mean, let's face it, if they're getting the ball on line and they're starting it where they want to and where they're looking and the read's decent, they're going to putt great. So it's not about, making them look perfect. It's just about the function of the entire movement and the stroke. So I'd say there's a lot of times when my best golf lessons are when I leave some of the things that might be not conventional alone, and then just tweak a setup change, or just get them to perceive the putt differently. Right. So sometimes it's just, changing their perception of green reading, or their routine, or, things like that might not show up in a mechanical video or on Sam Putt Lab, but then they gain confidence and belief, and then they start putting better.
So what do you think, Mr. Helman? Are there things that you wouldn't change in some players?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest attributes that a coach could learn, is knowing what not to change and what to leave alone. Everybody wants to jump in and, start firing things out there. You should change this. They see stuff and they want to try and make something perfect because, it should be 3 degrees, inside in the backswing. backstroke, and then 3 degrees or 2 degrees on the forward stroke if they're an in-to-in putter, or some people are straight back, straight through. They want to do that because they read it in an article. Well, so I think you need to find out what the really good tendencies of the player are, and then sort of just tweak a couple of things that could be improved just to make them just that much more consistent or repeatable. Too many times I've seen people just try and completely reinvent the wheel, to make a perfect stroke because they understand that, and that's I think where a lot of coaches go wrong.
Yeah, and you can really hurt a player pretty quickly. Exactly, if you change the wrong piece and go against their tendencies of what they do well, or I just try to get my putters to be athletic, and that's what I usually lead with. Is I want to get them in a posture and a setup position where they can be an athlete and just roll the ball at the hole, right? I mean, it seems simple, but we can make it as complicated as we want. But you've got to get that player to hold more putts and to have that belief. And a lot of times it's what you don't change is way more important than what you do.
Yeah, if you crush what they're successful at, then it's kind of like they have to start over.
Right.
That's not a good place to be, especially if they're a high level player and they want to go higher, or you know what I mean?
That's right.
That's tough, right? I mean, that's another question we had was, how much does confidence play a role in what we're doing with putting? I mean, like I said earlier, you get on a roll and all of a sudden you're making everything, and then all of a sudden you can't make anything, right? What happens?
That's sort of a intangible part of putting, obviously. I mean, I think you still have to have decent mechanics in order to create, because let's face it, confidence is reflected through making a lot of putts, success, right? So if we're not having success, it's hard to tell somebody you just got to be more confident. So it kind of goes both ways. So you got to get them into a process that they can trust, right? And then ultimately they can start to incorporate into pressure situations. I'm talking about teaching tournament players and pros, which is kind of where I teach more putting probably to mini tour players and elite juniors and whatnot. So it's giving them the confidence and I think that's where it's part of our jobs to get them to really own what they do, right? Understanding their tendencies, right? So that's why it's great when you have a measuring device to where they can go, okay, I know my tendency is to be a little bit of a right aimer, so I need more release in my stroke or whatever it needs to match up, or I'm a left aim blocker. So it's like, you get them to understand that, and then they can start to self-diagnose a little bit as they go along. And I always learn something from my players because they're the ones out there playing, and I want to know what they're thinking about and how they're feeling, and then what makes them confident. And then you, as the coach, is, just drive that home and basically it's our job to keep all that stuff in front of them to where they don't forget it. Because I mean, it's amazing. We think that they get it after that first couple lessons, but then even the best players that I teach need reminding of, okay, hey, here's why these things are starting to go wrong, and you're usually just getting them back to when they're great and what their tendency is and what their stroke pattern is when they putt their best. Next thing you know, confidence goes up, and so it's usually one little tweak of a setup or a reminder, and a couple of putts go in, and next thing you know, they have that belief again.
Yeah, and belief is a big thing, and I think that might go towards mood set, mindset, and sort of attitude. Like if you're missing a lot of putts, your attitude's not going to be great. So if you're standing over going, I haven't made anything all day, I'm on the 17th hole, I'm probably not going to make this one, and then I'm probably going to make the one on 18 either. So you get into a bit of a negative place, and that sort of affects your mood and mindset, and that might carry over for a few rounds, right?
Sure.
Even though you end the day on that round, it might carry forwards. I've seen it in lots of players. I know I've had it myself out there going, it's like the 15th hole, I haven't made anything, and I got a birdie putt. I'm like, okay, well, probably not going to make this one because nothing else has gone in today. So it's just, or if you miss everything left that day, well, then you might miss that one, right? But because you try something different in the middle of the round or the end of the round just to try and make something happen. But those are a couple of, I think, some good contributing factors, is that you can get into a bad attitude just because you missed some, and then of course you're not going to have confidence, right?
Well, that's our job is to keep reminding them. That's what I always tell my kids. They're sending me videos or my players, and it's like, look, there's no reason why the ball shouldn't be going in.
Mm-hmm.
And just remind them that they're the best putter in the world.
Yeah, we need to be the pat on the back coach there at that point, and motivate them.
Yeah,
because they're getting discouraged.
Sometimes they need that, right? So you got to keep reminding them that they're going to start going in. And again, it goes back to the basics of what we talked about before is getting them focused on. Like I had a putting lesson this morning with one of my tour players getting ready to go to Latin American Q school, and his stroke was fine. He's like, I'm not making anything, and all we worked on was how far the ball needs to roll, matching up the read, and then his distance decision was wrong, and it was in a bad place, and he was trying to spot putt when he didn't need to. So it was just about taking away some of the things that were creating conflict. Next thing you know, the ball's going in. So it was like, I'm like, what did you change? He goes, I'm just not thinking about all that other stuff that really didn't matter. So, I mean, a lot of times it's that simple. You get that kind of, process, and ball starts going in, confidence goes way up. Well, I didn't change anything with his mechanics, and I can guarantee he's going to putt better next week. I hope. So, right. But I mean, that's our job. It's like to figure out what we need to leave alone, which again, I could have jumped right into his mechanics, and who knows if that would have helped at all. But it just would have got him thinking about more stuff that really wasn't important. And we just thought about the process and then changed his routine a little bit. And then that's stuff that's going to help when he goes to play.
Yeah. One of the questions that we get a lot on Ask the Pro is being nervous over a really important putt. What do you guys tell your players to be like or act like when they have a really important putt?
I mean, it's easy to say, but you can tell them, all you want is just to not care as much, right? Or not try as hard. I remember somebody years ago asking Brad Faxon that very question: how do you handle yourself over a putt to win the tournament or these short putts? And he said, I just treat it like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if I miss this putt? My family still loves me. I still got plenty of money. All the things that really are important are not going to go away just because I missed this putt, right? So a lot of times it's a mental thing of getting that player to. I just tell them to focus more on the routine, more on the process, and then not. As soon as you start thinking about making it or missing it, then I think you're in a bad place mentally.
Yeah, I always make sure it doesn't matter sort of what level of player, because everyone has different goals. Someone wants to break 90, someone wants to break 80, someone wants to break 70. They're all at different places. So my question to them, if we're in a putting session, is what is the value of this particular stroke? And then I'm waiting for the answer, right? And they'll say, well, I'll make a birdie. I'm like, no, that's not the answer. And then they go, okay, well, I said, what's the value of this stroke? And they go, well, 1. So every stroke is worth 1. Like there's no extra value for a birdie putt. Yeah, there's an anticipation of if I'm even par, I'll go to 1 under, and you can add a value to that. But that's adding pressure to yourself, so now you're getting in your own way, right? That's the last thing we need to do. They're already in their own way most of the time. So we need to get them to step out of their way. So if it's worth 1, it's worth 1. They can't add an extra value to it. How much is a bogey putt worth? Well, it's still worth 1. So how much, if they get out of their own way and understand that the putt is worth 1 stroke, it doesn't matter if it goes in, right? It still counts as 1.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
So
absolutely.
That kind of mindset helps a lot of people. I find it helps a lot of people get out of their own way, and they stop adding that extra pressure to themselves, and it can affect mechanics if they start to add the value to it, and that's where I pulled it or I pushed it, right? So the pressure can translate into a bad pattern just by having a thought or adding that extra value to the putt.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, you guys. It was great talking all about putting. We got some good help there. That was good.
Thanks,
Mr.
Mike.
Sutton, you've got something coming up in March, right? You want to share?
I do. Yeah. Thanks. My 6th annual Guru's teaching and coaching workshop. I've got, every year I bring in some of the top coaches to speak and do some great presentations, and then we'll do some live lessons. So it's a full day. It's Monday, March 13th. And this year I've got some awesome coaches. I got John Tattersall, got Tim Cook, I've got John Dunnigan, James Ridyard's going to be doing some new wedge stuff, which we all know that I think Dunnigan and James Ridyard actually are speaking at the open forum this year down at the show. And Tom Stickney and myself, I'm going to be rolling out some putting stuff and trying to put all these things together and help the crowd a little bit, teach putting, and which is going to be kind of new. I've always done full swing and TrackMan and whatnot, so I'm gonna do some putting stuff, and then we're going to have a wide array of topics. So just email me. You can email me at golfgurutv@gmail.com to sign up, or check out my website at golfgurutv.com. And we'd love to have you. We've had, I think, last couple of years, we've had over 80 participants from 7 or 8 different states. So it's starting to be a little more nationally known, which is kind of cool. So it's fun. Thank you for bringing that up.
You bet. No, absolutely. And Mr. Helman, well, both of you guys, you're heading down to the PGA show.
Yep.
What do you think? What do you got going over there? What's a really good thing that you're going to do at the show?
Go ahead, Jay.
I'm going to show Wednesday, Thursday. I'm playing golf on Friday for the first time on the Friday, so then I fly home Saturday. So I'm going to try and take a little bit of personal time and stay in the warm weather while I can, because it's not so great here. But I just need some new training aids. Check out that stuff as sort of per usual, just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Try and stay on top of things anyway. But go and look and see if there's anything that can help my students and help me become a better coach, and sitting on a panel on the Thursday for the PGA of Canada. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, you're getting a big award.
Yes, you are.
Yes. Thanks. Yeah, it'll be fun on Thursday night.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks so much for joining us. As usual, you can follow us online on MikeFayGolf.com. Have a good day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Mike Fay Golf Show.
This has been a Mike Fay Golf production.
Follow us today on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are Mike Fay Golf, Team MFG.